Let's slow down for a moment and admit something quietly. There's a difference between what people say they want and what they respond to when no one is watching. You've seen it before. Someone insists they hate a certain behavior, yet their attention drifts towards the person who does exactly that. Not loudly, not aggressively, just naturally. Why does that happen? What part of the mind makes those contradictions feel normal? Think about how often attraction begins not with words, but with a feeling you can't fully explain. A sense of ease, a sense of tension, a subtle pull that doesn't ask for permission. Most women don't sit around planning these reactions. They experience them, then later build logic around them. That's where confusion starts. That's where most misunderstandings live. There's a quiet desire many women carry that they rarely name, not because it's shameful, but because language doesn't handle it well. They don't want to be controlled, yet they don't want to feel responsible for steering everything either. They want freedom, but they also want to rest. And not physical rest, mental rest, emotional quiet. Notice how draining constant choice can be. Even simple things pile up. Where to go, what to wear, how to respond, how to sound calm while thinking fast. When someone else enters that space and moves with certainty, something shifts. Not force, not pressure, just a calm sense that the moment is being held. Have you ever felt how relaxing it is when someone simply knows where they're going? It's not about taking over someone's life. It's about removing friction, about creating a small pocket where thinking isn't required, where the noise softens. That's why confidence doesn't need to announce itself. When it's real, it shows up quietly, in timing, in posture, in decisions that don't ask for applause. Here's a question worth sitting with. Why does hesitation feel heavier than a wrong decision made calmly? Why does certainty feel comforting even when it's imperfect? Attraction often answers that question long before logic does. And then there's play. The kind that isn't cruel, isn't sweet to the point of boredom, and isn't trying too hard. Just enough edge to wake the moment up. Just enough spark to make a conversation linger after it ends. Most interactions fade because nothing happened inside them. No shift, no friction, no small surprise. A playful challenge does something interesting to the mind. It interrupts routine. It creates a tiny spike of emotion. Not anger, not fear, just alertness. And alertness is close to attraction. That's why certain exchanges replay later uninvited. Not because they were deep, but because they felt alive. Think about how different it feels to be agreed with versus being met. Being met means someone is present enough to respond, not just accept. It suggests confidence without explanation. It suggests comfort with themselves. And that comfort is contagious. But there's a line here, and people feel it instantly. Play that comes from warmth feels safe. Play that comes from insecurity feels sharp. One opens the door, the other closes it. Most women don't analyze that difference. They just feel it and move accordingly. Have you noticed how attraction grows when things aren't rushed, when availability exists but isn't guaranteed, when attention feels chosen rather than automatic? There's something about space that allows desire to breathe. When everything is immediately accessible, the mind relaxes too much. When there's a little distance, curiosity steps in. This isn't about withholding. It's about having a life that doesn't pause on command. About moments where time passes without explanation, not as a tactic, but because something else mattered in that hour. That's when interest turns inward. That's when questions start forming. What's he doing right now? Why does his attention feel earned instead of assumed? Why does this feel different? If you're finding this kind of perspective interesting so far, it helps the channel more than you might think when you gently tap like or subscribe while you're listening. It lets these quieter conversations keep happening. Here's what's worth remembering as we continue. Most attraction doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, but doing it honestly. Less noise, less explanation, less chasing clarity before it's needed. And the deeper we go into this, the clearer one thing becomes.
What's unspoken often carries more weight than what's declared. And we haven't even touched the parts most people avoid discussing yet, the parts that feel a little uncomfortable because they're harder to dress up with nice words. That's where the next shift happens.
There's another layer that rarely gets talked about, mostly because it doesn't sound flattering when you say it plainly. Attraction isn't built only on comfort. Comfort keeps people around, but it doesn't always pull them closer. There's something else mixed in. A faint sense of risk, not danger in the obvious sense, but the feeling that someone isn't entirely predictable, that they have depth you haven't fully mapped yet. Think about the people who feel boring after a few conversations. They're not bad, they're not unkind, they're just fully visible too soon, nothing left for the mind to explore. Contrast that with someone who reveals themselves in layers. You don't know everything at once. You sense restraint. You sense choice. That contrast keeps attention alive. Many women are drawn to men who carry a quiet edge, not aggression, not chaos, an edge that suggests they can handle conflict if it appeared, but don't seek it out. Someone who doesn't explain their strength, yet doesn't need to prove it either. There's a calm in that, mixed with a tension that feels grounding. Why does that matter so much? Because safety isn't only about kindness, it's also about capability, about knowing that if the atmosphere changes, if pressure arrives, the person beside you won't collapse or outsource responsibility. That knowledge settles something deep in the body before it ever reaches words. And yet, the most magnetic version of that strength is controlled, chosen. The ability to be intense without leaking it everywhere, to set boundaries without raising your voice, to say nothing and have that nothing land heavily. Silence, used well, communicates more than explanations ever could. Have you noticed how some people fill every gap with words while others let moments breathe? One feels anxious, the other feels grounded. Presence doesn't rush to justify itself. It doesn't scramble to be understood. It trusts that understanding will arrive on its own. There's also something subtle about distance. Not disappearance, not neglect, just the sense that your attention isn't permanently parked. When someone knows you're available at all times, your presence loses shape. When your presence has edges, it becomes noticeable. This is where many misunderstandings happen. Some think attraction is about constant reassurance, but reassurance without tension flattens emotion. It soothes, but it doesn't engage. Engagement needs contrast. It needs moments where the mind leans forward slightly, trying to read the room. Why do unanswered questions feel heavier than answered ones? Why does uncertainty in small doses feel electric instead of stressful? Because the mind is wired to complete patterns. When something is unfinished, attention sticks to it. There's a reason curiosity often feels closer to desire than certainty does. Certainty ends the conversation. Curiosity keeps it alive. And then there are boundaries, quiet ones, the kind that don't require speeches, boundaries that exist simply because someone knows where they stand. When a man doesn't orbit approval, something changes in the dynamic. Not dominance, gravity. He doesn't need to say no often. The fact that he can is enough. This can feel unsettling at first, especially in a world that encourages endless accommodation. But respect grows in the presence of limits, not harsh limits, honest ones, the kind that say, "This is where I stop," without resentment or apology. Ask yourself this: why does someone who could walk away feel more stable than someone who never would? Why does choice feel more powerful than obligation? There's something grounding about knowing connection is chosen again and again, not clung to out of fear. If you're still here, listening closely, you probably sense where this is going. The deeper currents of attraction have less to do with technique and more to do with inner posture. Less about doing something to someone and more about how someone feels when they're near you.
We're moving toward the quiet center of all this now, the part that most people feel but almost never articulate. And once that piece clicks, everything else starts making sense in retrospect.
At the deepest level, past confidence, play, distance, and boundaries, there's a desire that almost never gets spoken clearly. Not because it's wrong, but because it's vulnerable. Many women don't just want to feel wanted, they want to feel chosen in a way that settles the nervous system. Chosen without negotiation, chosen without constant reassurance, chosen in a way that doesn't need to be announced. This isn't about possession in a physical sense, it's emotional. It's the feeling of being held in someone's awareness, even when nothing is being said. When a man's presence feels steady enough that she can relax into herself without monitoring the situation, that's when attraction stops being excitement and starts becoming attachment. Have you noticed how rare that feeling actually is? How often connection feels loud but shallow, intense but unstable? This is different. This is quiet, grounded, almost boring on the surface until you realize how safe it feels to stop performing. When a man knows who he is, when his sense of self isn't built moment to moment through reaction, something changes in how he relates. He doesn't grasp, he doesn't chase clarity, he allows things to unfold at their own pace. That patience communicates confidence more clearly than any words could. There's a moment when a woman feels this shift internally. She stops testing, stops poking at the edges to see if they'll move. She doesn't need to create drama to feel engagement. Her energy turns inward, not away from him, but toward the bond itself. Why does that happen? Because the mind stops scanning for instability, the body stops bracing, and in that calm, devotion can grow naturally, not forced, not demanded, earned through consistency and emotional presence. This kind of connection isn't built through intensity alone. Intensity burns fast. What lasts is reliability without predictability, strength without hardness, depth without exhibition, a sense that someone sees her fully and isn't overwhelmed by what they see. When that trust forms, something subtle but powerful takes place. She doesn't feel trapped, she feels anchored. And an anchor doesn't restrict movement, it allows rest. That's the core instinct most people miss. It's not about domination or surrender in dramatic terms. It's about relief. Relief from having to guard, to analyze, to stay alert. Relief in knowing someone else can hold the emotional weight of the moment without collapsing under it. At that point, attraction stops asking questions. It just is. If you've stayed with this all the way through, you already understand this on some level. And if these quieter explorations of psychology and connection resonate with you, staying subscribed keeps this space open for more of them. What matters most isn't learning behaviors, it's noticing how presence feels, how certain people bring calm without effort, how others bring tension even when they mean well. Once you start noticing that difference, you can't unsee it, and neither can they. Sometimes the strongest pull isn't excitement or mystery, it's the feeling of finally being able to rest in someone's presence. That's the kind of attraction that doesn't shout. It stays.